Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started tonight. We've got some housekeeping items to cover before we actually get to all of our questions. So we might as well start now, as you hear me trying to figure out my computer here. Perfect. Thank you all for attending tonight. If you haven't attended one of our Bear Talks webinars before, we just want to welcome you. My name is Candace Wolf. I am the Assistant Director for Alumni Activities at Missouri State University. Just a little bit about the Alumni Association. We're the ones hosting the event tonight. We're the organization through which Missouri State University students continue their connection with Missouri State after you leave the university. We're a non-dues paying organization, so if you've graduated from Missouri State, you're a member of our Alumni Association automatically, and we are happy to have you here tonight. A little bit about these Bear Talks webinars. These are alumni-driven professional and personal development opportunities. Previously, we had these available where alumni would connect with students, whether through classrooms or through student organizations. And we've had a lot of great alumni who wanted to participate, and then the coronavirus pandemic obviously caused us to shift our programming a little bit to try to put some programs online. And so this program has been developed to hopefully provide some of those professional and personal services to alumni to help you in whatever way you might need throughout the pandemic and afterwards, hopefully as well. So a little bit about how the webinar features will work tonight. We can't see or hear you as participants. We do have a Q&A feature for you. So if you have questions as we go along, feel free to submit those. And then I'll be coming in a little bit later in the webinar to help process through any questions that we receive there. We will share our panelists' contact information after the webinar tonight. So if your question doesn't get answered, we know we're not going to get to all of them, even the pre-submitted ones. Unfortunately, we just had so many, which is really exciting for us. But if you had a question that isn't answered that you would really like to see us get to, let us know in the follow-up survey, and we'll be sure to put you in contact with our panelists, and you'll also receive their information as part of the information that you get after the webinar tonight. Again, we won't get to every question, so be patient with us. You might hear your question combined with some other ones. We're going to try to get through as much information as we can. Our alumni are participating as panelists. They're not part of any sort of marketing group or to try to get you to join their organization. They're really here just to help serve you as alumni of Missouri State University. So a little bit about our topic tonight. Whether you're a recent graduate, a job seeker, or considering a career change, there are many ways to prepare yourself and your resume for a job search, particularly in an increasing digital age. So tonight we're going to hear from 3 alumni about their tips on things like identifying transferable skills and creating an elevator pitch for yourself, researching companies and networking, leveraging things like LinkedIn, Twitter, and data mining, customizing a resume and tips on getting around filtering software, and then the basics of personal branding and digital portfolios. Before I introduce our panelists, we did want to have send out a poll just to get a better feel for who is in the audience tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that for everybody. Question is, how long have you been in the professional workforce? And we know not every answer is going to be clear for every individual. Maybe you're a student or you haven't started your job search yet. Maybe you're just new in a career. Maybe you're a little bit further along in your career and looking for a change, or maybe you've been in and out of the workforce. Again, this is just to give our panelists a better idea of who is in the audience tonight. So let that go for a little bit longer. Looks like just about everybody has answered. So I will end our poll and I will share the results so everybody can see that. So a lot of senior career people who have been in the workforce for a while, which is interesting. I think this pandemic has caused a lot of people to kind of think about their career differently and look at different opportunities. So we'll keep that in mind as we go along tonight. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists, and then we'll turn it over to Margie Stewart, who is our moderator tonight. So first we have Sherry Cook. Affiliated with Missouri State University for more than 35 years, Sherry taught in the marketing department, primarily in the areas of integrated communication, advertising, and career development. She has for years taught a senior level class entitled Marketing Yourself. An alum of Missouri State, Sherry recently retired from Missouri State University after spending 9 years in the Career Center before moving part and then full-time to the marketing department. In addition, she served as a college relations consultant to state and local industries. Involved in all aspects of community life, she was named one of the 20 most influential women by Springfield Business Journal in 2005, was a member of Leadership Springfield Class 14, is a past president of Junior League of Springfield, and was nominated for a Missouri Women in Business Innovation Award for her work in curriculum development for elementary science education she and her sister created. Next, we have Andrew Crane. Andrew is the Director of Experiential Professional Development at the University of Georgia's Graduate School and a recent doctoral graduate from UGA's Institution of Higher Education. The XPD program provides career development support for graduate students interested in industry, government, and nonprofit career paths. Andrew has previously held career development roles that include being a career consultant, an assistant director within the UGA Career Center, and as a talent acquisition specialist for UGA Development and Alumni Relations. He's a past president of the Georgia Association of Colleges and Employers and a current research affiliate with the Center for Research on College Workforce Transitions at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Andrew holds undergraduate degrees in history and anthropology and a master's degree in student affairs and higher education from MSU. And then we have Derek Dockett. Derek is the 2002 graduate of Missouri State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Art and Design, minoring in Advertising and Promotion. Currently, he serves as the Director of Marketing for the Wentzville School District, a position he has held since January of 2018. Prior to that position, he spent 7 years with the Missouri Valley Conference managing digital and social media, creative marketing, and technology for the NCAA Division I Conference. Other career stops have included work in advertising and direct marketing. Derek has a passion for many things related to technology, but maintains a particularly strong interest in graphic design and visual communications. He's currently a member of the Missouri State University Alumni Association Board of Directors, and he resides in the St. Louis area. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Margie Stewart. She is the Assistant Director for Employer Relations for the Missouri State University Career Center, a great partner for us, and look forward to hearing what our panelists have to say tonight.
Thank you, Candace. Good evening. I am thrilled to be here to facilitate this discussion with these three talented MSU alumni on the topic of how to position yourself on your next job search. Regardless of where you are searching today or searching for the future, we all know that the job market is competitive. So today we're really going to try to focus on providing tips and advice on what you can do to put your best foot forward in promoting your strengths and qualifications in order to position yourself for the next job search. So yes, as Candace mentioned, we received several questions from the audience, and I've done my best to categorize into themes. But yes, if you did not get your specific question answered and you'd like some kind of answer, feel free to reach out to the Career Center. We will also be reaching out to you. But we're happy to help you in this job search. So the first question is really, I'm hoping will answer a lot of career changers, recent graduates who may feel they don't have much experience to compete, or those that are wanting to really stretch outside of their educational and experiential background. I hope you find that the topic of personal branding can be helpful. So I'm going to start this off with you, Andrew. Do you mind sharing your thoughts on the topic of personal branding and walking us through what exactly this means in relation to job search?
Yeah, sure. Happy to kick off the conversation, and thanks for hosting. Thanks for having us, Margie and Candace and the alumni crew. Just to preface before I start that we have a toddler running around in our house, so you may hear footsteps, running, screaming in the background. We're not torturing anybody, it's just potty training. So yeah, personal branding, I think a lot of the things that we'll talk about tonight will probably fall under the heading of personal branding, because really at the end of the day, that's sort of everything, right? It's a really like big sort of umbrella term, but you know, I think we can kind of pick it apart and maybe focus on a few things. So, you know, like I said, when I think of personal branding, and we do workshops at UGA on this topic, again, it can be everything. So in terms of your job search, one thing that you can think about is everything that you put out, either in the workplace or in your job search, is a writing sample, or a communication sample or a sample of your work. I mean, it's all these small, incremental things that sort of add up to what's your brand, your ability to follow through, or just your style, your work style, your communication style. So that's certainly one aspect of personal branding. When it comes to your job search, I think another thing to consider is personal brand in terms of a narrative, and that's maybe an easier way to think about it. So a lot of times when, as Candace said, I work with students a lot at UGA. We really start by talking more about specifically what narrative are they trying to put out about themselves. That's part of their job search. So that could be, how are they really identifying and articulating what their strengths are? How does that show up in their materials? And especially in the actual application, what's kind of that 10-second story that shows up when someone scans over your materials? I've been a recruiter before, and that sort of myth or that factoid about someone spending 10 seconds on your resume is absolutely true. And the personal brand can really come through and how things are organized and what's the story that comes out. So those are some of the things I would start by kind of highlighting in terms of what a personal brand really is. I think about it really, what's the story about you, either through the work that you've done, or how you're crafting your materials to tell a certain story about yourself.
Absolutely. I always think you're understanding who you are, kind of reflecting on yourself and what you bring to every job, regardless what you're doing. I think your personal brand, it helps you be, if you can reflect on what that is and you're consistent with it, then you don't have to, you're not trying to think of who am I supposed to be now. It helps you kind of stay grounded. So thank you. Sherry, I'm going to ask you the next question. I know you have lots of experience working with college students, with teaching students and working with them through possibly the internship and job search process. What do you recommend to job seekers as far as getting around resume filtering software?
Well, I think the main thing, you have to do your research. You're going to hear that, I'm sure, a lot tonight, but it all starts with research. So you have to understand the lingo of the company, kind of the corporate culture of the company. You can find that by looking at their website, by looking at their job description, by maybe talking to alumni that work through at that company, or through LinkedIn. But you have to understand the lingo. And then I think one mistake that a lot of job seekers, a trap they fall into, is they think you create a resume or a cover letter or a set of references, and instead you tailor it to that particular job. So you're going to use those key words. I'm going to use the example of Cerner. My son works at Cerner Corporation, and Cerner's really big on C words. So if you sprinkle some of the Cerner lingo into your resume, you're more likely to get through that screen. So instead of it's a client, it's not a customer, it's collaborate, you're a consultant. So you want to use the language of the company, and that's primarily how you're going to get through that filtering system.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes too is we get so hung up in trying to apply that we're not just reading the directions and just kind of paying attention to the context of what we're applying for. Thank you, Sherry. Derek, with your marketing experience, tell us a bit about digital portfolios. I know that a lot of people are familiar with them, but they may not necessarily know what's really supposed to be included in a digital portfolio, and how do they present it to employers?
Sure. Yeah, I guess first, for complete transparency, I'll definitely share that my background, as was mentioned, is in more the creative side and graphic design and things like that. So having portfolio is pretty much a requirement for the jobs that I've applied for. And in some where it hasn't been, it's actually aided in getting the interview and ultimately getting the job, because it's showing that examples of the work that you can provide to that potential employer. I think that's really important for people to know is that, especially if you have a portfolio that you've also tailored like your resume, it shows that you go the extra mile to show what kind of work you may be able to produce for that employer. For example, someone working in the creative field as a designer, obviously you show the type of work that you do, the type of work that you specialize in. This could be things working in the Adobe programs and things like that. But also if you're a writer, if you're a technical writer, showing your samples of your writing, having a collection of them in digital format, something that you can easily share online, posted them in a single web space or even in a Dropbox, even in a Google Drive, something that you can easily share a single link and say, for examples of my work, please feel free to visit these samples, or putting them in a visual format where you can present them in a way that's even better. I know I have assisted some folks where they've had copywriting experience, and showing off your writing isn't always the best or the most visual thing. But if you have the actual samples of the writing that you did and how it was laid out in the design aspect of it, that shows the extra mile, and that gives them more of a visual feel to it. And that could be to your advantage. So there are a lot of tools out there that you can use to do that. I mentioned using just something as simple as Google Drive or Dropbox. But Adobe has free products. There's Behance, which is a portfolio website. And personally, I've built my own portfolio website using a website builder called WordPress. So there are lots of different ways of doing it. But definitely if you're anywhere, any type in that creative field, visual, or something where you have samples of work that you produced, it's very important to be able to have those and also cycle them in and out as you progress in your career. You have better examples of the work that you've done to show your growth in your work. That's even better and more important too.
Oh, that's great, thank you. I know even for some that may not be creative in the creative fields, they still may also want a digital portfolio, and that can include even just big projects that they might have worked on and wanted to present. So it doesn't have to be just for creative career fields. So I do think it's a good idea for anybody to at least keep track of your projects, things that you're proud of. And that's great information. Thank you, Derek. One of the important things about job search, and Sherry alluded to it earlier about researching employers, so important. And so, Andrew, I'm going to ask you, what should a job seeker look for when they're doing research? And are there some resources that you might recommend job seekers use to kind of find out more about an employer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Sherry was definitely right that research is really a crucial element of your success, especially if it's sort of a tighter job market like what we're starting to see now. But it's a little hard to kind of broadly answer that question, right? You know, what should you research? And the reason for that, I think, is that it boils down in part to what you want, right? So it, I think, begins with kind of exploring or reflecting, getting some clarity around what it is you're looking for in your next job, because then you know what to go out and research, right? Is it salary? Is it work-life balance? Is it location, or, you know, promotion potential? You know, you want to have, you know, some sort of a underlying theme, you know, to the research that you're putting together that's eventually going to help you get what you want, right? So, you know, that's the starting point. And of course, you know, generally it helps to, once you get towards an interview or an application point, to research companies and just start to learn more about them. I mean, that's where all of the ideas that Sherry mentioned a minute ago come into play in terms of, you know, the specific language that Cerner uses. A lot of times companies will have, you know, boilerplate language that they put on their website or on their job posting that people sort of skim over as being fluff, but those are clues to what is valuable in the company and the organization. You can get similar, you know, information from meeting people, doing informational interviews. So really starting to learn the ins and outs of the work and the language and the kind of conceptual framework that the company uses to describe what they're looking for, you can turn that around and use that in the search. I mentioned informational interviews. Some other places that you can do research are LinkedIn, of course, lots of great resources, not only for finding people, but increasingly companies have a presence on there. Follow companies, so you kind of can passively collect information. Other social media outlets are really good for that. Places like LinkedIn and also Glassdoor increasingly have information about salary, information about sort of like reviews of either the interview experience or what it's like to work there. Even if you look on Google, there are sometimes reviews of what it's like to work at the company. Those are all things you should maybe check out, and even just generally Googling the company to see how they've shown up in the news. Sometimes you might come across yellow flags, things that cause you not to want to invest time, to go down that track. But it may also be that you come up with questions to, some good insightful questions to either more clearly identify, is that company going to be able to provide what it is that's important to you, or at least to make sure to do your diligence to make sure that you're not kind of walking into a bad situation. So the research, you're kind of covering yourself on both ends with the research. You certainly want to do it to prevent yourself from walking into a bad situation. But on the flip side, it's very clear when someone interviews, when they apply, but certainly when they interview, if they've really done the research and kind of made a focused effort towards trying to align themselves with that organization. And if you look at resumes and applications all the time, that becomes really clear. So it's very important. It can set you apart.
Absolutely. I know one of the questions was trying to discern a legitimate job, if it really was what they stated it was. And I know that research sometimes is hard to do, oftentimes calling them, or if you could find somebody else who works there to kind of get that insight. And also, you also mentioned about doing research on benefits ahead of time, and that is know those things before you apply, oftentimes can really help solve the questions that you have. Sometimes people apply and then they wonder these questions about benefits and salary, and sometimes finding out ahead of time would be most beneficial before applying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Andrew. Sherry, we're going to kind of go over to behavioral interview questions. I know you're familiar with these. What kind of advice do you give students on how, or alumni, job seekers, how to answer behavioral interview questions?
Okay, first, I think it's important to know that a behavioral question is usually not about your answer. It's more about the way you process the information, how you can communicate back. So they're not so concerned with the actual answer as the process. What we talk about is a process called the STAR process. So if you kind of think about what the situation was. So if they ask you, tell me about a time when you couldn't meet a deadline. So maybe you would talk about the situation, the project you were given, and how you formed a group. And then tasks, so situation, task, action, and result. So if you kind of take it through those 4 steps. So the task was you had to solve this problem. You formed a group. You assigned parts for each person in the group. But then COVID came along and kind of made the group split up and go to all parts of the country. So you had to regroup from that. So you got behind on your deadline, but the results were, and that's one thing people a lot of times forget, is to talk about the results. But the results were you regrouped, you formed a Zoom group, you answered the question, the client was happy with that. So again, the main thing I want to stress is it's the process, not the answer, that's important.
Absolutely. Thank you. It is a way I always kind of tell students to prepare is think about all the things that you're proud of and start writing accomplishment statements in that STAR format. And it really helps you prepare for any question that may come along. So thank you. Derek, I'm going to ask you a social media question. We all use social media in personal as well as professional use. So as a job seeker, what are some of the positive and negative aspects of someone's digital footprint? and kind of just give them some of the things to be cautious about.
Sure. I think the first thing to remember is that your digital footprint will follow you wherever you go. I once did some social media education for college students, and specifically they were student athletes, but it was to tell them that, hey, life for you will continue after you're a student athlete in college. It will be how you find a job, what you do after, post college. Same thing goes for us, everyone. Using myself as an example, I did once get a job because of social media, because I had connections with someone, and I sort of had an inside track to make connections with the hiring people, and then ultimately was able to get an interview, and the rest is history. But I think it's very important to remember that there are several negatives, and I'll start there first, because if you're using your social media in a way that may not be appropriate for someone in business to see, that could be a harm. Especially if you've had some moments where you may have said something derogatory or negative about a brand or a company that you may have been disappointed with. You have to keep that in mind. I mean, we've all probably had issues with a company that we've ordered something online and we were disappointed with it, and we hopped on social media to complain. And you never know, 3 years down the road, you might be looking for a job for that company. So it's important to keep that in mind. The other thing is to make sure that you sort of treat your social media as if, I always like to use the term as if you're being interviewed by the media. You don't want to say anything that will just cause a stir and get yourself into hot water. Now, on the flip side, there's several positives of it. Using social media, Twitter, LinkedIn specifically, you can connect with people that are decision makers, human resources types, that ultimately would be able to tell you more information about a position, about an opening, future positions and openings, or any question that you may have. There are several people that are willing to discuss those things with people that have a legitimate interest in knowing more about their company or position within their company. You'll find in several different career fields that networking on social media is a thing. Now I'm working in the education world, and oftentimes you'll see people sharing, oh, we've got positions here, please apply. And then next thing you know, someone in your private messages is asking, hey, what's the culture like working there? Those things happen. You may not see them out in the open, but those things definitely do happen. So it's important to keep a pretty steady, balanced social media profile. The other positive thing about it is that you can learn more about the company by following them on social media. We've talked about research. Using social media to follow a company on Twitter or on LinkedIn or on Facebook can give you an upper hand to learn about some new part of the business that they may be doing. And you may know about it because you saw it 2 hours before your interview. Those kinds of situations also happen as well. So it's just keeping that sort of happy balance of knowing I'm using my social media. It's okay to be personal and be yourself, so your personality, but at the same time, knowing that, is someone going to see this down the road that I may not want to see this? So just knowing yourself, how you are in your personal life, and just sort of not being embarrassed by anything you'd post.
Absolutely. So kind of on the reverse, how do employers use social media in recruiting their candidates?
Yes, and that is something I can tell you that happens all the time. Specifically, my experience been from looking for interns and filling internships, going through to see young adults and how professional or what types of professionalism they have because of the role that they may be inserted in. If you're going to be interacting with clients, you want to know, how does this person behave in public? How does this person behave behind closed doors? Or what kind of peek behind the personality can we get? Are they outgoing? Will they feel comfortable talking to a complete stranger that they've just met for the first time that's going to be a client or a customer of theirs? It can tell you a lot. It can also tell you, is this person responsible or not? What's their decision making like? It's a peek into the personality without sometimes having to do those personality questions that we sometimes see on the online job interviews. So it definitely happens. And I would tell folks, definitely don't be surprised if you hear about someone saying, well, they saw my profile or things like that. So it's definitely a thing. And And I'd be shocked if you did not know of companies using it on a regular basis. But again, it's public. If your profile is public, people can Google and find you. And it's just as easy as that. So that's the other thing. Google your name and see what pops up, and see what news releases are out there or what comes up, because 9 times out of 10, if you search your own name, you may find your Twitter or your Facebook or LinkedIn profile as one of the top 10 first links on a Google search, unless someone's got the exact same name of you, of course. So definitely a good rule of thumb.
Great advice. I wanted to go back up to the prior question. A question came in, what does the STAR, they wanted to know what the acronym stood for again. So Sherry, do you want to repeat it, or I don't mind doing it? Because the S in the STAR is situation, and what is situation? The T stands for task. The A is action, and the R is results. So we just call it STAR method to kind of make it easier to remember that. So hopefully that answers the question there. Great. So next question, Andrew, you had talked a little bit earlier about informational interviews, in-person networking. Tell us some suggestions on how job seekers can use their network in the job search, kind of comparing the in-person networking versus social media or online networking.
Yeah. Well, you know, we talked about how important research is, and I think networking is right up there too, with being something that can really be a make or break skill set or aspect of your job search. One thing that I really believe very strongly in is this idea of like luck readiness and kind of positioning yourself for opportunities to find you. And Derek just sort of alluded to this a minute ago in terms of kind of cultivating and maintaining your network as you go through. And if you have, you know, spent time kind of developing a personal brand or just putting out there, you know, what your interests are, what your accomplishments are, what your strengths are, then your network should already be, you know, kind of attuned to those things. And I think for most folks, especially, I know we have a lot of folks later in their career, you know, or 10 years in, that they've probably done that. But you know, when it comes time to do a search or when it comes time to change jobs, then you can start to kind of invest in that a little bit more proactively, right? That may be on LinkedIn, or it may be in person. And you know, I think it's definitely okay to kind of play to your strengths. Some people are really comfortable with in-person networking. Some people really adhere more naturally or more strongly to you know, doing things on LinkedIn or having a phone call or a Zoom meeting. Actually, for a lot of job searchers right now, the current situation is, you know, sort of helping them in some way, because they're much more comfortable with, you know, this sort of a format than they might be in a coffee shop meeting. So I think it's definitely okay to play to your strengths, but the name of the game is that your network needs to know how they can help you, and they need to know that you need help, and they need to know what it is that you're looking for, and what are your priorities in your search. I think a lot of folks sometimes, you know, maybe it's the first time they've had to do a career change, they'll start kind of reaching out to their network, and you know, they might be saying things like, I need a job, or I'm looking for a new position or something, but folks don't really know what to do with that information, right? You need to give them some leads or some parameters, and usually that's going to be the next question. You know, is what is it that you need? Tell me more. You know, it's really helpful if you can kind of give them some pointers, or again, you know, articulate that brand in terms of, you know, I know I'm good at this, I have XYZ experience, these are the types of things I'm looking for my next opportunity. You know, especially if you do that either in a passive way, just kind of casually talking to folks, or you're actively reaching out and trying to have some direct conversations about those things, then folks can start to feed you opportunities. And that's what you really want, is your network to start to, you know, do work for you, and you know, help you find side doors into organizations. And then the other aspect is that you can create your own side doors. So I think it's always helpful to begin by kind of auditing your network and kind of, I guess, getting your network up to speed when you're in that kind of a situation, seeing what connections you already have. But then you can also develop some new ones through resources like LinkedIn to try to accomplish those same things. But the more focus you have, the better, I think.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that the people you're reaching out to may not be the end goal. The point is to get more contacts for other, to help lead to more people.
And the one thing I would add to that, just as a tag on, is it's really helpful if you follow through. Like if folks give you a lead and they tell you to do something or make a suggestion, you really are rewarding that effort by doing what they suggested, and then sending an email saying thanks so much. You can kind of build some momentum in that way. So it's very important to also follow through.
Oh, that's great. One of the questions kind of on this topic that came up was, how can you successfully network on LinkedIn without coming off as being too forward? Do you have any kind of thoughts or suggestions on that? Because I think that is something that people feel uncomfortable with.
Well, there's two things that immediately come to mind when it comes to LinkedIn. One is that's the space where that's intended for this kind of activity, right? That's a dedicated space for these sort of networking connections to happen. So folks are expecting that others might reach out to them, especially if there's some clear connection. Me personally, I'm happy to connect with folks if they write a note. I used to just accept everyone, but at this point, I already sort of have a network built, and I'm willing to connect, but I want to know what's the connection, unless it's already clear in some way. So that's one thing I would say is make it clear why you're reaching out. And one way that you can make it less awkward is by framing it as a request for information. It's usually not off-putting or threatening if you're just saying I'm looking to build my network, I'm interested in the work that you do, or if you say I'm just trying to learn more about this field. And then if folks connect, or if you're already connected, you can follow up and say, I'd like to get some more information. I'd like to learn from you. Those are ways that you can frame the conversation that's not, you're not really asking them for something that's going to be damaging to them in any way.
Right. One of the advice I got a long time ago was never, never, never ask for a job. That's not the point of networking, is to get information or advice. So I think that's important. Thank you. Sherry, I have a question for you. What recommendations do you have for job seekers who have a huge gap in their employment? This is sometimes a hard thing for people to overcome. So what kind of things should they present in the resume or job search material that would help them kind of focus on their skills and experience and not the gap?
Right. First of all, I think it's important to realize that a resume is not an application. It is not something that has to be an exact chronological listing of everything you've ever done. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning, when you're tailoring the information for a specific type of position. So your most recent position, or it may not be the first one you want to list anyway, because it's not the most relevant for the experience. Excuse me. So you don't have to have everything on there. From a purely functional perspective on your resume, I would put the dates on your right side rather than the left side. The left side's called the power alley. It's the first thing they see, the most powerful part of your resume. Put those dates on the other side. You're not trying to show those. And then also remember that not everything is paid work experience. So what have you done maybe during those gaps? Maybe you've gotten a Google AdWords certification. Maybe you've been in a networking group. Maybe you've been in professional groups. So it's not just professional paid job information that is the only thing that you have to not fill the gaps. So look at all the different experiences you've had that might fit into those gaps. So that's one thing. And then finally, I would say you may have to do some soul searching. If you have big gaps and maybe you are missing some things, then you have to ask yourself, what can I do to enhance those possibilities? Maybe I need to volunteer at a certain place, or maybe I need to get into a leadership role or a professional group. So you may have to do some homework to fill those gaps. But the thing I would really say is, remember, a resume is not an application.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. Derek, I'm going to ask you this question about salaries. I know this is always a a hot topic for people. Sometimes it's difficult to determine what the job might pay, or if it's going to pay enough to meet your financial needs. So how would you recommend somebody find out about a salary that's not published in the job posting?
Sure. Yeah. I've always been of the mindset that you never know unless you try. I think a lot of folks, they find out that they want to find out about a job, but they're not sure they're a fit. They're not sure if it's going to be salary-wise right for them. The first step is you've got to apply, because you don't know who else is going to apply and where you'll land in the field. So I wouldn't let the beginning of the process stop you. Once you do get deeper into the process and you've had an interview, or especially a second interview at that point, and you don't know what the salary is, it's okay to ask the salary expectations and doing it in a professional manner. For example, if they say, you've done an interview with folks, especially a second one, and they say, do you have any questions? That's your time to ask about things like, what's the culture like? What are the benefits like? And if you still don't know, that's your opportunity to say, what do you expect the salary range to be for this? Different companies will handle that in different ways. You may work for a private industry, and they may offer the salary based on whoever they hire and their experience level. You may go to another interview and they have a set salary range. They may present that information up front. But when you get that opportunity to ask questions in a professional manner, framing it as, what's the range, or what do you expect to pay for this position once hired? Now, I can tell you that once you're much deeper into that process, and you've gone through, and if you don't know, that's a little bit of a thing, of an issue, because you want to be able to have and make an informed decision if you are offered a position. And then the other thing to remember is that don't accept it if you don't know it. Don't get yourself into a hole, because if you've accepted the position, that's a little bit more of a thing there too, because you don't want to get into the situation where you've accepted without knowing. So I don't think anyone wants to go down that road. But it's definitely a way to do it in a professional, easygoing manner. And most folks are receptive to that. I mean, it's in this time and this culture now where we are in, all employers are aware of that. And I think most now, it's not so much of an issue anymore where, the salary is not known, especially deeper into the process of hiring. But definitely when you have the opportunity to ask, just in a professional manner, asking either for a range, asking for specific if you would like, but that's a good time to ask there when you've had that first or second interview.
Thanks. And also just knowing, like, when you do get a job offer, it's always nice to ask for a little bit of time and make sure you have all the information so that you can make a good decision. Some people may feel pressured to give an answer right away, but you don't have to. And knowing as much as you can before you say yes or no, because once you say yes, then it's a done deal, and it's kind of too late to negotiate. So thank you, Derek. We do have a lot of people who are in the audience that are going through career changes. And so, Andrew, do you mind giving some recommendations? Like, how does one format their resume to be noticed for a career change? Or how do you use transferable skills to market that experience?
Yeah, I think this question sort of comes back full circle with a variety of the conversations that we've had around networking and research. Career changes are really tough, and it can there's a spectrum, right? If it's just a job change or a big dramatic shift in your career. So that's something to keep in mind. Not all career changes are created equally. But if you are especially trying to make a bigger transition where you're really focusing on how your skills will translate in a different space, one thing that is really important is the research, and going back to that idea of framing and using the right language. So to cite kind of a simple example, folks that have been in the military, and I have a brother-in-law who's been in, was a veteran, and now he works in logistics. And based on what he did when he was in service, transitioning into a logistics role made a lot of sense. He was also just very interested in that kind of work. but it was a space where his, what he had done is sort of translated really well. But that's an example of a space in the military, where the lingo is very specific, the types of, you're usually in a very specific type of role, and a lot of folks, that's a challenge that they have, is kind of making that translate into a different space, and that can apply to varying degrees in all kind of different scenarios. But you're sort of almost unlocking a puzzle. If you can figure out how to, just use a different framing, different language. You're not lying or being dishonest, but you're just helping folks understand. And again, going back to that idea of a brand and a narrative, it's a story that you want to make sense to the reader, right? I always tell students that when they're reading, when someone's reading your resume, you want it to be a story that is immediately kind of clear what the path is, and with the logical next step in the story being that opportunity, whatever it is you're applying to. And so the language is really, really important, and you can get those clues through your research and networking, as well as a lot of self-reflection about what are your transferable skills, what are the things that really are unique and valuable that are going to be selling points in a new space. And sometimes things that maybe we take for granted are really valuable, and of course vice versa can be true. I work a lot with PhD students right now, and they constantly undersell themselves because they're working all day with other PhD students and they don't see those skills as being unique. But in a new space, there's a lot of valuable transferable skills that they can emphasize in a different way.
Absolutely. And I do believe those who've been in the military do have a lot of experience to transfer. And sometimes it's just the jargon that might throw an employer off, and just kind of trying to convert it to speak their language. So yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. We have another question here from probably a recent graduate, looking at how do you, this is for Sherry. What are some recommendations on how you can market yourself when you don't have experience? You might not have gotten an internship, or you're just trying to, you get that catch-22 type thing. Like you can't get a job because you need experience, but you don't have the experience. So what kind of recommendations do you have, Sherry, for situations like that? It may be a little similar to some of the other questions you answered.
Right. Yeah, it is similar. Work experience is not all paid work experience. So what other things have you done? What class projects have you done? What leadership roles have you been involved in? What community volunteer things have you done? I always use the example in class of travel. Travel is an essential part of many jobs today, and whether that be leisure travel or work travel, that's a key piece of experience. So you've got to look at those transferable skills. I think a lot of times too, particularly for somebody that's on the front end of their job search career, you look at what a recruiter looks for is interest, skills, and fit. How are you showing that you're really interested? Let's face it, most of us are not doing the job that we started out doing, in my case, many years ago, maybe not so long for some of you. So we've all had to learn new things in our jobs. So how willing are you to learn new things? How quickly can you learn? How do you convey that information? You might not have the experience, but you might, can you convince them that you will do your darndest to learn whatever it is you need to know for that job? So that comes down to the interest and the fit, as well as the skills. So all of those are components that are important.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for mentioning those three things, because I always talk about the skills, interest, and fit. I'm going to throw out one last question, and then I know we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Andrew, what recommendations do you have in preparing and delivering an elevator pitch?
Yeah, this is a challenging activity because I think it's something that comes naturally to some folks and is very awkward and difficult for others, and I'm in that latter category, I think, because you sort of it's like the LinkedIn thing that we talked about earlier. You're kind of feeling like you're in this position where you're trying to get something from someone, or you're trying to, jumpstart a conversation in a way that doesn't always feel natural. So, I mean, my advice is to, practice helps. It's one of those activities where reps will help, and just the more you do it, I think the better you get at it. But really kind of understanding, what are the key points when you introduce yourself. Again, thinking about that networking concept of, how you want that person to engage with you or help you, what are the highlights you want to touch upon, which is going to vary based on the context of the situation and who they are. And then really just being authentic and making it authentic. And that's really, either the easy part or the hard part, depending on how much in your own head you get. But, it is really important, and especially if you're in an interview context, which is not really necessarily the same thing as an elevator pitch, but when you're introducing yourself in an interview or maybe an important networking situation, that can be really a valuable skill, because if you can navigate that first sort of speed bump successfully, it'll boost your confidence for the rest of the conversation. So, I mean, as silly as it is, even just talking to yourself in the car or recording yourself, just again, doing silly things to just get the words out. And if it's not something that comes naturally to you, it might take some extra mental gymnastics to get to that point.
Absolutely. And the Career Center, we have a kind of a script kind of outline that you can use, like introducing your name, where'd you get your degree, what background, what work experience do you have, and to think of examples. It's always good to have some examples to support those skills you have. And then that last part is kind of tailoring it to whatever situation you're in, from that's why I'm interested in this job, or that's why I really wanted to come talk to you, whatever that might be. But I do think it is a great first impression, and we all know that we're going to get asked, hey, tell me about yourself at some point or another. So it is very important, and the more you can practice that, you can position yourself for the next job search that you're doing.
Yeah, and the important thing is that you're trying to start a conversation, right? So just introduce yourself and then kick it back to the other person, feed it back to them, and that's really what you want to do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a 30-second spiel and like, now I'm done. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Candace now, because I know we have a couple questions in the Q&A, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, we do. And if anybody has any last minute questions that they want to propose, looks like we just got one in there. So yeah, feel free to send those to us. I think can get through these pretty quickly for those who might be on a time crunch. First one I want to ask is, and I think this is probably a place a lot of young alumni are coming from, or maybe somebody who's just getting ready to graduate and do their first job search. What do you do if you have had a bad reputation online or need to make your social media more professional? How do you go about making that change? Anybody want to take that?
I'll hop in. It's tricky because you have to know the sort of, you're walking a fine line. The easy thing to do, obviously, if you have an account or something like that, a social media account, is delete it and start over. But then when you wipe it and start over and you've got this profile that, you've lost followers or things like that, no one wants to do that. So it takes some work to go back and clean it up. But the other thing is, we're all human. I think that's, everyone knows that. I don't think any employer that is looking to hire someone is going to look at an 18, 19, 20-year-old and go back and say, well, the important thing to remember is you don't want to have anything that's offended someone. If you're, teenagers being teenagers, I think we all would understand. But you just don't want to have that questionable content on there that you would have to, boy, that's not good. If you can take the time to clean that up, that's great. Now, the other thing is to draw a line and say, from this point forward, this is how I'm going to maintain myself on social media. This is how I want to present myself on LinkedIn. And for one, LinkedIn is definitely not the place to not be professional. That is the professional network, social networking site. But to just set a hard line and say, from this point forward, I am going forward for that, and continue to build up, interact with people who work in an industry that you may be interested in. follow those types of people, connect with those people. And you don't necessarily have to tweet at them. You can just follow them and reshare and retweet. And because when you do those types of things, that's engagement, and people will notice, hey, I see you're liking or retweeting content I'm sharing. Are you interested in graphic design? And it starts to get things going. But that's not to say that people won't go back and do it. But the good thing that you can do is you can go back and delete and clean up. But the other thing to remember is you've got to put that best foot forward from a point and continue to go forward with it.
Sounds great. I know we have a couple of questions related to an elevator pitch. One being how to differentiate your elevator pitch from your resume, your application, your cover letter. Should they all kind of be the same or sound different? And then if anybody would like to give an example of their elevator pitch, I think that would be helpful as well. All right, Andrew, go for it.
I knew you were going to do that to me. Well, so I was thinking as you were saying that about different situations. So you read my bio, I guess, in the beginning of my work role and the things I'm doing. I've done a lot of career development stuff at UGA. So my other elevator pitch, my second life, is my PhD research. And when I'm at a conference, I have to introduce myself and talk about that. And basically the gist is, that I've recently finished my PhD at UGA in higher education and Institute of Higher Ed, which is basically at UGA is kind of a policy-focused program. There's different types of higher ed programs. And my particular interest, even though I've done a lot of career development work in my professional roles, my research interests focus on rural students and rural student access. My dissertation was qualitative, but I've done qualitative and quantitative research. And now I'm continuing that. I'm trying to finish by publishing those things and doing work with the University of Wisconsin in Madison. So that's kind of my academic, you didn't hear a lot of that when you introduced myself, but that's sort of my elevator pitch for those are the types of things I'm interested in and do sort of as an academic in addition to my professional role. So that's, I guess, again, I don't like doing these things, but it doesn't have to be overcomplicated.
And then maybe, Sherry, do you think that it's okay for your elevator pitch to kind of mimic everything in your resume and application, or should that be different in some way?
I think it's going to be a lot the same. I don't think you're going to want to talk about your favorite foods. Obviously, you're going to talk about the key points, and that's the same things you put in your cover letter and your resume. So it's just the introductory part.
Perfect. We're getting some really good questions at the end here, and I want to again just remind you guys we'll try to get to these after today too. So a lot of them are anonymous. We're not going to know who you are, but please feel free to reach out to the Alumni Association or to the Career Center, and we'll help you. I thought this one was good. You mentioned that we're all adding new tasks to our job. How do you know when it's time to just do the extra work versus ask for help versus ask for a raise or just move on to a different company? How do you make that judgment?
I think that might depend if you're in a position currently, your relationship with your employer, your supervisors. If you're comfortable, you can go in and sit down and talk and discuss those things in the open. That's the best way. I'm a firm believer that if you can be as honest with your supervisor or your employer, that's going to help your relationship in the long run. And you would know if the culture of that company is a place where you'd want to work and continue to work. So if you can have that discussion in the open, that's step one. If you feel that you can't, find someone that you can confide in and get their feedback. That may just be a coworker who's on the same level as you, and they may be going through the same things. You never know. The important thing to know is you never know unless you ask. So keeping those things internal may not be the best case scenario, and that would lead you to wanting to be in a different position. But the sooner you're able to sort of get feedback, if that's from a coworker or from a supervisor type, the better. And then ultimately, hopefully, that would help your culture and your standing in that current position.
Perfect. Thank you. One last question that's for you, Margie. Is the Career Center going to be open for in-person appointments in the fall semester? What does that look like for you guys? You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. We are planning to have virtual appointments during the fall predominantly. However, students could ask if we could reserve like our conference room just to have more social distancing. It's pretty much our offices are just small. So that's why we're holding virtual appointments. So that's kind of our plan at this time.
Perfect. Thank you. Again, I know we didn't get to all the questions, but I want to be cognizant of our time and go ahead and wrap up for the evening. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Margie and for the Alumni Association, all the work that's gone on behind the scenes to make this event happen tonight. We will send a survey out to all of our registrants. So even the people who couldn't make it tonight, we'll send out a survey. Please send us suggestions for improvement, as well as any future topics that you might be interested in our panelists. Again, we'll include contact information for our panelists. They've all agreed to do that for follow-up communication. So if you didn't get your question answered directly, we're happy to help you find that information. I did want to let you know our next session is going to be September 10th at 6 p.m. It's going to be going beyond paycheck to paycheck. So talking about how to make a budget, how to maybe deal with the financial situation you might be in because of COVID or other things, or just how to go beyond living paycheck to paycheck. So we'll talk about the importance of a budget, how to make it work for you, maybe how to tackle student loans. We've got somebody from financial aid who will be joining us, and then when to look at a banker or lender and what to look for there. So should be an interesting topic. We'll include that registration information or information about the next webinar whenever we send out the survey, and we'll follow up with you guys too to make sure you get registered for that if that's something that's of interest to you. Margie, any final thoughts, or panelists, anything else you want to share before we go tonight?
We do have a lot of resources that I'm going to be providing, and some of them are on the 30-second introduction, along with some other really good resources. And again, anybody who wants to talk more specifically about their situation, feel free to reach out to us at the Career Center at MissouriState.edu. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, panelists. You have a lot of wealth of information, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with our audience.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.